Okay, so for the sake of the recording, if anybody is like up close to the microphone or typing, just ask that you maybe not do that during the session because we'll be able to hear all of that. Also, don't put us on hold. If you need to step away from your desk, just set the phone down, or you can hang up and call back in because the recording will pick up all of that music that's in the background. Okay, so let's get started. When you first log in, if you don't have access to Common Services, you would need to go into the Administrative Services and allow your staff to have access to the Common Services optional fields. So that's this little button right here, and this is where it all starts. And if you have already been trying to figure out what this button is for, that's what we're going to go over today, and how you can use this not only to track additional information about customers or employees or vendors, but we can also use it on a transactional basis for our entries that we make in each of the subledgers, and that it will actually push all of that information down into a general ledger batch entry. So all of the information that you put into the optional field is retained from the time you enter that transaction in all the way through to the posting to the final resting spot in general ledger. So let's look at some of the optional fields that are in the sample company, which you guys do have access to the sample company, and so you might go over there and get some good ideas about how you want to use optional fields for your company. So you can see there's quite a few in this sample company. Optional fields are not related to the modules here. This is just where you set up the optional field that you're wanting to track information about, whether it has to do with a vendor, an item, a customer, or an employee even, or whether it goes on a sales order or not. So when you look at the screens in Sage 300 for, say, customers or vendors, you may find that it would be really nice to have an extra box or a field on that screen that records information about that vendor, perhaps what type of vendor they are or what type of customer they are. Maybe they're an A customer, B, C, or D, or you have a special way of classifying a customer, and you want to capture that at the time you're entering that customer in your system. So we can do this sort of thing by setting up an optional field, and this is where you go and do that. So, for instance, we have this one here called color, and it's been noted that it's the item's color, so most likely somebody set this up with the intention to use it in the inventory control. We also have something here, approved by. This might be something that I would enter in to approve a sales order, or maybe even approving a purchase order, or approving an accounts payable invoice. So you see this field could be used by several of the different modules that we have, depending upon the need that we have for it. So you can use an optional field more than once in a different module. So let's take a couple. So I'm going to start with the first one called AC. Now, I don't know what AC number is. I don't have any clue. But we can tell that it is a text type field, and the character length is 15. So that means I would have up to 15 characters, alphanumeric and special characters, that I could type in and utilize with this particular optional field. If I go to another optional field, I can see that this is an approval, but it's a date. So that means that anytime we would use this optional field, that the characterization of it is that it's a date, and we would be entering a date that we approved it or that we are utilizing the system. Maybe it's the date that we put it in. So there's also a logical, so credit warning. This would be if a credit warning maybe popped up when we were entering an order, and we could enter a credit warning on that for yes or no. Maybe we want to put a credit warning on a new customer because we haven't validated that they actually have good credit yet. So we can use this optional field in a couple of different ways. When we're entering an order, or when we set up a customer, we haven't validated their credit yet. We have an integer. Okay, that's another type of field. So discount grace period is what they've got here. Let's go ahead and create a new optional field. So for purposes of this, we're just going to create an optional field that I want one of you to help me out. So if somebody would come forward with an optional field that they would like to see added to, say, a customer, what would be a field that we could add? Anybody?
Cell phone serial number. Cell phone model number.
Okay. Oh, cell phone. Okay. So maybe do they have a cell phone? Like that? Okay. Or are you saying like you want to put their cell phone number or their mobile in there?
Maybe mobile or make and model. So maybe I'm a repair. Maybe they're customers where I do repair for, and I want to know what kind of cell phone they have. So we know if we should be selling it or buying it or tracking it.
Okay, that's a good one. Thank you very much. And so we'll go ahead and put the text in there, and we probably want to leave it. I mean, some models or makes could be, 5 characters. Some could be 10. So maybe a good length in this case would be 15. So we would allow that model number to go out to 15 characters. Now, the other thing that we can do is, let's say, for instance, we know that we're only servicing certain makes or models, okay? So if I turn this validate on, okay, then I can say, well, I want to have it validate on a list of values that I have here. So if I know that I only service, for instance, Sony, Motorola, and any other phone except iPhones, then I could use my values in here and set those values up, okay? On the other hand, if I want to just be able to type in anything I want in the make or the model, then I could leave the validate turned off and uncheck this, would do that. Now, if I turn validate on, it has some really great features, and that is that the features with validate are that somebody couldn't come into the field, for instance, and type Sony, and then type Sony, and then maybe somebody else comes in here and types Sony. So if I have my validation turned on, okay, then I'm only accepting the values that I type here. That way, when I have somebody entering data, okay, they are not allowed to enter false information or spell something incorrectly. So validation can be a great tool, but just understand that if you add new models to your cell phones that you're going to start servicing, you want to make sure to come back into your value and add that value back in here. If we don't have validation turned on, you'll notice that the allow blank went away. That's because we're indicating that, well, we don't know what the value is. At this point, we'll take anything. So that's how the validation can or can't work. So if we turn off allow blank, then that means if the value doesn't match one of these, then we're not allowed to put it in at all. Okay? So this is the strictest form of validation if you just have that one turned on. If you have this one turned on plus validate, then somebody would be able to put a blank in there. Maybe it's because they don't know the customer's model number yet. They're going to call back in, for instance. So you might want to allow blank. So let's put some makes in here.
Now, Karen, while you're doing that, now what if I want to change this list? Can you go back in and edit this once you set an optional field?
Yes, you can edit, but you wouldn't be able to delete. That's a great question. Thanks for asking that. You can always edit, like the values, but if let's say you've misspelled Sony, or you didn't want it to have caps, then you wouldn't be able to control that as far as that value, because if the value is already used, okay, on, say, another customer, you would have to go locate every instance of where that word Sony is used that's in capital characters and delete it, and then go and fix the value. So you have to be careful about what you're adding or not adding. So what are some other cell phone models?
Samsung?
Good. Is HTC one? I think it is, isn't it? And then you've got, what's the one? LG? I think they have one, don't they? And what does LG stand for? Does anybody know?
Life's good.
Life is good? I like the life is good. I've heard that before, but I've never understood if that really is true or not. So
they do with the TVs, they say that. They say, LG, life's good.
Okay, fair enough. Let's go for that then. So this is enough of our values. So we've now going to hit the add button here, and that's going to set up our optional field. Okay? So I think we had decided that we wanted to use this optional field, say maybe when we're doing a sales order or something. Did I hear that correctly?
Perfect.
Okay, so let's go then and understand how we're going to set this up and use it. So if we're going to use that particular cell optional field that we just set up with the model, then we have to go over to the module that we're going to implement the optional field into. So for us, we might be saying that we're going to put it in the order details so that every time somebody places an order or puts an order in the system, we're going to make sure that they have to put in the cell phone or the cell phone that make model that they're using. So if we put it at the order header, okay, that's what this is, that's really too far up the channel, because what if they have more than one model that we're servicing or repairing, and we might want to create 2 line items on the order for that cell phone. So in this case, I would probably choose to put that information on the order details. So you'll see that these are a lot of the other fields that have already been added to the order details. Okay, so I'm going to hit the insert button, and we're going to go add our cell phone. So you'll see you've got that entire list that we were looking at early over in the common services. Let's click on cell. We're going to add it. Value set. What that means is there a default value that you want us to use? Okay, and if so, you would say yes, and then you'd pick whatever the default value is. So if you know that, say, 75% of the time your customers are picking the Samsung or they're using Samsung, then you could use that as your default value. Now, do we want to require it? That's another thing. Now, it went up here at the top because I actually got off of focus, so it put it in alphabetical order. If I want to require this, in other words, we can't enter the order unless we have this cell phone model, then I might want to say yes to that. And if I say yes, you'll see that it auto-inserts automatically, because if we're going to have it be required, then it has to obviously be inserted into the sales order initially. But if you're not going to require it, you can still have it auto-insert, which I think is what we're going to do for this particular instance, because not everybody that's bringing something in is maybe bringing in a cell phone. Maybe they're bringing in their televisions for repair or whatever the case might be. So now we've got this field set up. So let's save it. And then we're going to go over to our order entry, and I'm going to enter a new order. So we're going to say customer 1200, which is our famous Ronald Black. So let's go down here, and we're going to enter an item. Now, I know I don't have any cell phones in here, I don't think. So let's just go pick a different, I think an answering machine. No, that's not what I want to do, because that's going to force me to pick serial numbers and stuff here in just a minute, and I don't want to do that. Let's just say it's a calculator, and pretend that this says phone. Okay, so this is really a phone. And so now if we go over here to the right, okay, we can actually pick up on the optional fields. Does anybody else know a shortcut key if I didn't want to scroll across. What could I do to see all of the information on one screen? Does anybody know what button I would push if I wanted to see?
The one in the far low left-hand corner, item tax?
Yeah, item tax. You can also hit F9 on your keyboard. F9 will do the same thing as the item tax button. So good job. So we're going to put in here quantity ordered of 1. And maybe you want to put in a delivery date, or maybe you don't. You want to just leave that open. But down here, we're going to put in our optional fields. So here's our cell that we just added, right? So because we told it we are validating, we need to go in and indicate the type of model that it is. So now we have this information trapped in the order. So I can close this down now, and that optional field, it now becomes a part of that sales order. So I'm going to hit add and close, and I'm going to post this order. Okay. So at this point, I have the optional field. It's added to the order, and I could go in and look at it at any point in time that I want. Now, you might be thinking, well, that's great. What about the shipment? So what happens here now is we've only transferred that optional field and attached it to the order. But if you wanted it to follow through and also go to the shipment, we have to go back over into our OE setup and add that optional field in there. That way, when we ship it, okay, in the shipping details, it will retain that cell phone or that model number. Okay, so we're just going to go add it, and we are going to, at this point, you can say whether you want it to be required, because maybe by the time the shipment takes place, it has to be on the order, okay? Or if it's not required, you don't have to put it there, but we do want to put auto insert yes. And that way, when we ship that order, it's going to go all the way through to the shipment, as well as being on the sales order. Now, if you want it to follow through and go to the invoice details, you would also need to do that. So everywhere where you want this optional field to appear and follow through to, say, over the general ledger, you need to make sure that you are turning the right buttons on here to get it to go over to the next level of either the transaction or over to the next module. Okay? So now that we have this in here, okay, I'm going to go back to our order. And I want to go see how my GL setup is in here for just a second as well. Okay, I want to create and post a new batch. And date and processing. Let me just change something here. Okay. So I need to also make sure that I've added this. If I'm going to have it carry over to the general ledger, most of my orders are hitting the accounts receivable as well, right? So if I need to have that carry over to the accounts receivable side, I better make sure that I'm putting it on my invoice details over here as well. So I can put in cell and auto insert. Okay. So now I've ensured that it's going to go from module to module. But there's also some other things I need to do with my optional field. So I'm going to go back to my order details. Oops. Sorry. Okay, I'm on invoice details. I need to go back to my settings, because here, these settings determine whether this optional field is going to go all the way down to the general ledger transactions, okay, and also get sent over to the other subledgers. So I'm back over in my order entry setup. on the invoice details, because this is a transaction that we know is going to push over, okay, to another subledger, which would be the general ledger and accounts receivable. So here I'm telling it that I want to make sure that it does go over into my accounts receivable detail GL accounts. So these boxes should be checked if I want it to go over into all of these boxes. Okay. So I can save that. That's for my invoice details. Now you might be asking, why wasn't it here for some of these others? And that's because we didn't turn it on over underneath the invoice details first. So that has to be set up first. Then you can come over and put it to the settings here and change these as you need to as well. And then the order details, we'll save that. The order details doesn't have a settings, okay, because it's not sending anything over to the general ledger or any of the other subledgers, right? If you're just entering an order, there's no impact on the general ledger yet. So you're only going to see these settings buttons when there's an impact to the general ledger or one of the other subledgers. Okay, so we've got it set up all the way through here. Then we also need to make sure that we've set it up for accounts receivable if we're going to be tracking that there. So invoice details there. We've put it here. And we can put our settings and ensure that everything is going to go over, which it is, because all of them are checked. Okay. So now let's go to that order that I created. I think it was order number 74, and we're just going to do a ship all. So we'll post it. And I can choose to print that or not. I'm not going to, because I know that you guys all know what it looks like, and most of you probably have your own customized form anyway. So I've got my shipment, so that should have occurred now. So there's my phone. And let's go see if those optional fields carried over. Yes, it did. So there's my Samsung. So now I'm going to go capture the shipment number. And if I want to create my invoice for that shipment, that's my shipment number, okay? And at this point, I can do the item tax view if I want to come look at it here. But I can see there's my cell phone. It's still, my model number is still coming over. And so I can save that line. And I can go ahead and hit post if the invoice total is correct. And I'm going to post that. And I'm not going to print the invoice right now. So at this point, this is where we would probably go into our inventory control, right? And we would run day in processing. And then that would push over our transactions to the subledgers. Okay, so now it's complete. So we should be able to go over, and we'll open up General Ledger 2 here, get our batches. I've got a whole bunch of stuff in here. Okay. So there's our shipment clearing. Okay, that's in here. There's no optional fields with our shipment clearing. for that particular shipment. We can drill down and see. That's for our order, I believe. Yep, that's our order. There's the phone. Okay. If we go over and we keep drilling, if we kept drilling down into that, we would see the optional field is there for that particular entry in the general ledger if we continue drilling down into that. So if we go back in here, we're at the journal entry level. We could have gone back here, and then, of course, you're going to be able to see your optional field from here. Okay, so there it is. So technically, this transaction has come all the way down into the GL, and it's still retaining that optional field. Okay, let's go over and look in AR. Does anybody have any questions right now?
Well, I know the answer, I think, but you can't do like in Sage Fixed Assets. You can tell Sage Fixed Assets to look through your entire database of choices and auto-populate the potential choices, like Samsung, HTC, iPhone. Sage 300 doesn't have that feature, right? Auto-populate my optional field list by looking at the database.
I'm not sure I understand what you're meaning.
When you're sent the optional field, and I set up a cell phone and I start using it, and I realize I want to now validate it. So people are putting in N.J, for New Jersey, NJ, period, NJ. So
once you start using it, you can't go back in and then turn validation on. You're right.
Well, you can't turn it on once you start using it.
Right. Once you start using it, it assumes that that's the position you want to use that optional field for, and it's, it is what it is. So if you later notice that people are starting to put all kinds of abbreviations in, and instead of typing out the word Samsung, they're just putting in Sung or SS, you wouldn't be able to go back in and change the criteria on that optional field to validate it.
Okay.
Good question. Okay, so you can see here, this is the order, okay, as it pushed over to accounts receivable. So all of that optional field information is still here. It's still retained with my original order, even though I'm in accounts receivable. So I can still see all of that right here.
Do the optional fields print on an invoice or sales order?
You can customize your invoice or your sales order to print those, so yes. But it would involve a customization to print them on your invoice. But I'm sure one of your consultants would be happy to do that little modification for you.
Okay.
So I posted that batch down, okay, and then over in my GL setup, probably transaction details. Probably should have put it in here too. So if you want transaction details, let's see. Let's go over to our transaction batch list and GL, and it should be all the way down here at the bottom for our AR batch. I thought I posted it. Let me check one thing here. See what my GL is set to. Aha. Okay, so that's why it didn't post, because I have this set to on request using create GL batch icon instead of having it set to during posting. So I need to go up to periodic processing and tell it to create my GL batch. That's why we weren't seeing it over in the GL. Okay, so that's completed, and now if we go back to batch list and we do a refresh, we should see our accounts receivable batch in here. It's probably going to be one of these, so I'm just going to open up this first one down at the bottom and see if that's it. This is our AR invoice. It's Ronald Black. I don't think that one's it unless somebody remembers what invoice. Well, let's drill down. See if it is. Yeah, that's it. Okay, so that's our, because we have our order number was 74 and our shipment was 65. So this is the right one. Okay, so now I am here and I can actually, if I had turned on my optional fields for the GL, I would also see that optional field in here as well. So I'd be able to go over here, optional field, click on it, and it would show me the cell phone actually in here as well from my accounts receivable invoice. So my mistake, I didn't turn on my optional field to have it go all the way down into the general ledger transaction. So let me show you how you would do that. You would just go back to GL Setup, optional field, go to the transaction details, and then add your cell phone in here, and then have it auto-insert it. Okay, that way it would have carried through. Okay, and I'm in general ledger, so it's not letting me do it right now. Does anybody else notice that the system won't allow you to make changes while you're in, especially the setup changes? You're not allowed to make changes to your setup once you're in any of these icons, because the system, if you have another window open or a user is in there actively doing something, it could probably cause a data issue. So if I would have done the GL setup for the optional field before I hit that post button, we would be able to open this up, and then you would have seen in this field that the optional field would have carried over and put itself right in here, and you would have seen cell and then the Samsung as the value and the value description.
Karen, there's no way you can get those if you have just an optional field. There's no way you can get it on the main detail field. It's always going to sit in optional. We've got to do programming changes with the SDK.
Yeah, it would always sit in optional. So anytime you create an optional field, and in this case we created what's called an optional transactional field, and it's always going to appear. You have to go to that optional tab to get it. Yeah. So you would just be going over optional field. Now, if it's something you're using all the time, don't forget that you can move these little icons around. So if you know you're always going into the optional fields and you're looking at them, you could move this icon so it's closer to when you first open this batch listing screen, and then it'll always be there for you even when you come back in the next time. Okay, so if I open it again, my optional field is right up here where I put it the last time. And that saves by user. Now, let's talk about optional fields from the perspective of using them to track things about, say, an employee. So I've seen a lot of creativity out there for this, and you might actually notice on all of your screens you have literally an optional field tab. Okay, so every screen practically in Sage 300 has this optional field, right? And so you're allowed to create as many optional fields as you want. Okay, it's unlimited, and they will migrate over, so there's no concern about losing data or something like that. And that's the nice thing about optional fields, because many times we'll have somebody say, well, Karen, we would like to know what vehicle we have assigned to an employee. And there's really no place to put it, on any of these tabs. And so that's when your optional fields come into play. So we could put in here the optional field that we want to relate to the employee. So before we can add an optional field to an employee, we have to go into the payroll setup optional fields. And I'm going to use that cell phone thing again. So we're indicating that we want to track this at the employee level. But notice all of the other optional fields that we could utilize here. So you could even put optional fields on time cards, okay? And you can have those time cards carry into transactions. It's like cutting payroll checks and things of that nature. So things can continue to keep rolling with each individual transaction that you enter. So many of these are transactional optional fields, but the one that we're looking at right now for employees, that's just at the employee level. You can also put one on the earnings and deductions, and then have it get attached to the employee earning deduction. So you have to fill in that optional field at the employee earnings deductions level. So you would start out putting it at the earnings and deductions level and making it mandatory maybe at the employee level that you have to fill that earnings and deduction optional field in. Let's go to the employees, and we're going to type in that cell because maybe we want to supply all of our employees with a optional field here, or they get a phone. So we could actually set this to required because every employee we have is required to have a cell phone. So if I hit add here, okay, I got to get out of my payroll window, and then I'll hit add. So because I'm requiring this field, okay, whenever I go into an employee now, let's just bring somebody up here. So I now have the cell phone, and I have to put a value in here. So they have the HTC, and I can save it. So that's how you can make optional fields work in your employee files or your customer files or accounts payable files. And you can, again, have as many as you want from optional field standpoint. Any questions? What are some creative ways that you guys think you might be able to use this, or do you feel like you would use optional fields?
Maybe job name or job description to keep track of like going forward with a particular project.
Okay, that's a good one. So if the employee was assigned to a particular job or something, we could put in an optional field. Or if you're just wanting to put like on a sales order, maybe there's not enough information on the reference and description field, so you'd want to put a job ID and attach it to the sales order. That's a good idea too. Anybody else?
How about expiration dates? Like,
yeah.
I don't know, a service contract or a business license or something like that?
Excellent idea. You could also do that for items, maybe lots that are expiring, because
right.
you do have the ability to put optional fields on lots and serial numbers too.
Right.
So
is there a way to
use?
Is there a way to use that? I mean, the optional field would establish what the date is that we want something to expire, but then, say, a service contract, I guess, we set the expiration date, but then when we go to enter an order or something for that customer, is there a way to make it indicate that their contract's expired?
There's not a way to do that out of the box. You would probably have to like create a little custom program for that in the background that went out and ran. I don't think it would take too much to do, but the optional field just sits there. It's not actively going to go in. Now you could definitely run a report or create a report that says show me all of the contracts or something that's going to expire, or the items that have expired or that they're going to, as of this date. So you could certainly use it for that, but it's not going to actively reach in and say, oh, you can't sell this because the item has expired, or this contract, you can't do anything with it because it's now expired. But as far as warranty and things like that go, you can set up warranty codes with expiration dates in your inventory control and assign those to your items, and then that would definitely allow the item to expire. Anybody else got any great usage for optional fields? Okay, well, I just want to reiterate that you can use these optional fields on lots of different screens. As I said, almost all the screens, unless it's like an inquiry screen, has optional fields. So I'm looking at a couple of them here with national accounts and customers. You can put these on vendors, vendor groups. Don't forget it's transactional, so you can put it on transactions. They're very powerful.
What about on the AR customer records, adding a field to say whether a purchase order is or is not required? Is that?
Yeah, you could definitely do that. So you would set up an optional field. You would assign it to the order entry level if you're doing an OE setup. So you would set it up to go to all the different levels like I did earlier with order details, shipment details, invoice details, so that it would, transpire through the whole way. But, yeah, you could definitely do that.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else? Okay. So let's see if there's anybody that's typed anything in here. Okay, tandem care. Yep, Dennis got it. Can I auto set or auto fill? So Dennis, you typed in, can I auto set or auto fill? Did we already address your question?
I think so. I think earlier we did.
Okay, very good.
Now, what about,
all right.
Is there a multi-select field? Like, can you multi-select optional fields within a within a field? Like, what if a couple of things apply under one optional field header?
Oh, you mean like I want to select, they have a Samsung and a Sony and a HTC?
Yeah.
No, you wouldn't be able to do that, not auto-select. But I like the way you think.
Okay.
That's a good request for Sage. Now, if you free-formed, in other words, we had validation turned on, but if you free-formed that cell, in other words, you didn't have validation turned on, then you could type in, up to 60 characters on a text field. So you could potentially have a whole bunch of stuff that you're, putting into that field.
Okay. And you can modify that, right? Once you've entered it, can you go back and modify the value or the description?
Well, I can always go put more values in here, okay, to this particular optional field, but I can't change things like the length or the type of field that it is once it's been established and used.
You put in K-Smart, like what if you wanted to put in K-Smart 1, K-Smart 2, or something like that?
Yeah, it would definitely let me. Yes, it would let me. And I can, I can't, once I've added one, I can't modify the value, but I could modify the description.
Okay.
Okay, so I could do that. But it won't let me change the value.
Okay.
I could delete it, too. So I could delete this value as long as K-Smart wasn't assigned to any other user or not any other user, any other module. So if you would, say, take this optional field called contract description and you had already assigned K-Smart to something in that optional field, I wouldn't have been able to delete K-Smart because it's already assigned.
If you deleted it where it was assigned first, would you be able to delete the line item?
You can, yes. So if you set it up in here and you assigned it to something, but you haven't, let's say, posted it down to where it's going to go to the next module, then yes, you could delete it. But let's say you were using this contract description on a sales order, and the sales order had shipped, okay, with that value K-Smart in it, you would not be able to go back in and then delete K-Smart because it's already gone through a step in the process of completing that order.
That makes sense.
Okay. Good questions. Anybody else? All right. Well, I want to thank you today, and I really appreciate your time. Your feedback was great. Thank you so much. And we'll talk to you next month.
Sounds good. Thank you.